나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교. Hi. Hello, friends. Thank you for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about enlightenment today. Somebody asked me recently online, what do I mean when I say enlightenment? And at first I thought that's what I've been talking about all these years. But it's odd, isn't it? Human beings, we hear things, we learn things, and yet we don't necessarily understand what it is we learn. Can we truly learn something without experiencing it? Interesting question. I've relayed in videos, and I just got a congratulations on the podcast for over 400 podcasts. So, and I know there's more videos than that. So yeah, this is a big resource, this channel. Oh, I know. First order of business is I'm going to put up some images here, and I want to talk about how to use this channel. I want you to use threefoldlotus.com as well, because that's a great resource, a static resource that I occasionally add materials to, especially on the threefoldlotus.com/home/home.htm, not HTML, HTM. And you can get to that page from the home page of threefoldlotus.com. You just got to scroll down just a little bit and you'll see core study materials. You click on that, boom, you'll go right to that page. And there's over 50 links to what is karma, the 12 nidana, how do we chant, why do we chant, all these typical questions that come up as we practice this Buddhism. And there, what you'll get is a PDF or an HTML page that the PDFs you can easily print out and keep. They're just reference material. Oftentimes, some of them are essays that I've written. Some of them are an essay with study materials that I've gotten from all over the place. But in essence, it's just a resource, right? Something to help you study and answer questions you might have, at least as far as they can go. It's not like having an interaction, which these videos are kind of like. So use threefoldlotus.com. But on this channel, on the homepage of this channel, you'll see there's, first of all, every channel has a menu that says videos, playlists, I forget, a couple of other things. And then at the end of that, there's a little magnifying glass at an angle, and that's a search, not the search at the top, that's a search of YouTube, but a search in the channel. And you can type words like karma or chanting. And when you type the word chanting and clicks the search icon, the magnifying glass, it'll search just this channel for every video that contains that in the title or the description. And you'll have that result set. And then you can dig into that. So instead of going through 500 videos, looking for something that relates to whatever you're, or just haphazardly going through the videos, you can pick something to ask, and videos from 10 years ago or last week, they'll all come up. And you can pick and choose the one that seem more relevant to your question or what you're wondering about. Okay, now that business is not out of the way, but taken care of, sort of. I hope you make use of that, because it makes this a much more powerful tool for your practice, which is what my reason is for this whole thing. And while we're on that subject, thank you so much for participating. Number one, using the search, asking questions, using the comments, of course, liking, subscribing, and sharing these videos. And additionally, of course, my patrons, you guys that contribute financially or with gifts that you send me related to the altar or practice or whatever. Incredibly important to get those dollars coming in. I hate to sound crass, but this stuff ain't free. And so already contributions, not only in cash, but I got this great monitor from one of you. I've gotten tools to help me create, and advice on audio and so forth. Over time, this channel keeps getting clearer and sound better. I don't know that I could look any better. But suffice it to say that this channel has improved over time, in large part because of your support. So I'm not alone in thanking you for that. All of us are thanking you for that. Okay. Business. Enlightenment. I have, and there are problems with this book. This was written a long time ago, this Beyond Zen. And it was written at a time when I was still surrounded by a lot of scholarship that I'd collected from my time early on with NSA, Nichiren Shoshu of America. And even after that was gone, Nichiren Shoshu in general. But I was studying during the whole time and finding out a hell of a lot more about sects of Nichiren and the questions about Nichiren Shoshu's claims. And the more and more I researched, of course, the more and more obvious it became why they were so adamant, not only Nichiren Shoshu, but their offsprings, that you shouldn't study anything outside of what they're telling you. That should be a big red light, a real alert. When somebody is telling you explicitly that 3,000 years of scholarship you should not bother looking at, when Buddha's own exhortation was study all of Buddhist scholarship and non-Buddhist scholarship, yet this group is telling you, no, just do what we say. Intrinsically, that's a problem, especially in Buddhism, right? There's all kinds of cautions against that in Buddhism. And so, my studies, they didn't end there. But in these early books, I often quote things, ignorant of the sources. That doesn't mean that the information wasn't good or accurate, but it means that it was conditioned by an organization that insisted that Nichiren was the original Buddha, which the more you search into that, the more nonsensical that is. We practice Shakyamuni's Buddhism, not Nichiren. We went through every single Gosho, every single letter that is extant. You and I read them verbatim, along with their cultural biases. But it is absolutely painfully obvious Nichiren never considered him the author of, himself the author of Buddhism. Right? He maintained his humility throughout his entire life. He paid homage to his mission, his practice of being a votary of the Lotus Sutra. What does that mean? It means that he was, to the nth degree, the clear proponent of this ultimate of Shakyamuni's teaching, the Lotus Sutra. He was teaching Lotus Sutra Buddhism, that by its very act is Shakyamuni's. And he was following in a long line of scholarship that he constantly referred to and paid homage to. Dengyo, Miaolo, Tendai, all the way to Nagarjuna, and prior. And Shakyamuni himself, of course. Nichiren knew who he was, a humble man with an intensely amazing, glorious mission. Your mission, my mission, same one. That's why Nichiren is our teacher. Okay? So, although you may see the name Daishonin in here, that's totally invented Nichiren Shoshu. Nichiren was a monk. Translates as an honorific that we in the West would call a priest, but he was a monk. And as a monk, his mission in life, his great task in life that he honored as a humble man and monk was setting the record straight so that everyone would practice what? The scholarship of Shakyamuni's Buddhism, with a special focus on his ultimate teachings of the Lotus Sutra. That's Nichiren, not the pre-existing Buddha. Like, see, that messes things up. That's why people are so confused in those organizations and the membership, wondering, is Buddha a man or a mental state? Because the way they talk about Nichiren, they say he's the original Buddha. That's crazy talk. What is true is that certainly Nichiren reached a level of bodhisattva that was fully aware of the Buddha way. But he walked this earth as a bodhisattva of the ultimate degree of bodhisattva. He knew Buddha experience, Buddha state, Buddha clarity. He lived his life as a bodhisattva, a great teacher, a sage, somebody very clear on the teachings of the Dharma. That's Nichiren. That I can get behind. That I honor. But anyway, that's in a way of excusing my not knowing that soon enough to correct that in this book. Nevertheless, everything I say and quote in this book is true. It's verifiable. So the only reason I bring up this book is because there is a chapter that I dedicated to this question: single-mindedly desiring to see the Buddha. Can you read that? I don't know if this camera will focus on it. Anyway, I just have a little paragraph to introduce what is the letter to Jijobo. And as I say, we've already done a video on each of the letters, but I think I may read it's not a very long go show. But it speaks directly to this question: what is enlightenment to you? And it explains it in a way that you can really understand why is it also that we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. So I'll give you my take on it real quick. My answer to this question, I've answered it several times, is to discuss experiences that I have while practicing and chanting the Daimoku to my mandala to address my inner Gohanzon nature, my Buddha wisdom, so that I can open that door and experience life clearly without the encumbrance of my attachments. What does that mean? And if you read older translations from Hinayana to Mahayana, oftentimes and again, this is cultural bias, but there are translations of those early texts, and especially around the last couple of decades, in the discovery of many of these texts in Gandhari, or what is it called? Naroshti? Garoshti? It's a script adopted by the northeast region of India that is very similar to Prakrit, which was the language that Shakyamuni spoke in as a more layman's Sanskrit. It was a language that all of the dialects and languages at the time could understand and use. I won't go into that whole diatribe again, but India had a lot of languages. And Gandhari was another script that was used, Karoshti, I think it is, to write down, to record these oral teachings that have been transmitted for hundreds of years. In those documents, when when the Gandhari scribes would write down, and what later was translated into Pali and Chinese and Japanese and Korean, the anglicized versions of those translations use the word stress. And they define that first noble truth that all life is dukkha, or stress. Not sufferings, but stress is a form of suffering, isn't it? The nice thing about stress, in my observation, is that it describes a much broader sense of what dukkha is. And suffering, especially in the West, we tend to think of suffering as injury, right? But suffering doesn't fully capture the meaning of dukkha, because a more fundamental truth of suffering, even if it is injury, whether it's injury of feelings or actual harm, bodily harm, or reputation, or on and on, all of them are incorporated into the body as stress. And so I think stress is much more useful adjective to understand what we deal with day to day in human life, samsaric life, right? So, yeah, medications, pills, I'm old. Stress about my appearance, your appearance. Stress about your finances, your credit, your debits, your car. Is it running well? Does it need a tune-up? Can I afford a tune-up? Stress about your relationships, your parents, your children, your lovers, your friends, the economy, taxes, on and on and on and on. All of these stresses, we embody them. So this is the body-mind thing that I often talk about, right? And in our minds then are constantly conditioned moment by moment with this vast collections of stress. And it's super, super fragile, unstable. Like you're probably stressing right now that I'm bringing up all these stresses. And if you want to know how fragile or volatile your life state is, just think for a moment how quickly your life condition changed. It may still feel changed. It may have lasted a second, but it doesn't take much to shift it around. Somebody cutting you off on a highway, Somebody hitting the brakes when you didn't expect them to. Somebody you think you have a very close relationship with, you suddenly discover has completely betrayed you. Maybe even to your face. That call from the school about your child. I could go on and on and on, right? The important thing to remember is that even though we remember those trauma, those moments, what we don't think about so much is that even when we're not in that moment, that stress is still in us. It weakens our immune system. It changes our epistemological basis for every thought that we have. We just don't see and touch and smell and taste that. It's at work inside, but it's working. And so, what's enlightenment? As simple as Shakyamuni said it. Liberate yourself from these stresses. Well, that sounds easy enough. As an English sentence, it makes sense. There's a subject and a verb and a result and a beginning and an end. Yep, I'm going to liberate myself from stress. If it were only that easy. But according to Shakyamuni, it is that easy. It is a decision. A decision that's so profound that it penetrates to the fundamental aspect of what you are, what experience you're having, and all of that pent up, stored up, recording of stresses. You pry yourself free from them. They just aren't there. Have you ever had a moment in life when you were sitting by a lake, or maybe when your child was born, or maybe when somebody else's child was born, a relative, or even just a friend, watching the birth? There's thousands of, maybe just walking through a forest and hearing the little noises that seem so crisp and loud that you never would hear in the city or at home. Feeling the floor of the forest yield under your weight in this wonderful, glorious carpet. Watching the light break through the branches and leaves and meander its way into a nice, cool, shady area. Or maybe just climbing stones, big boulders and rocks, and sitting on one at the top and just looking around from a different vantage point. That feeling of just taking it in, and that awe, that amazement, right? There's so many accomplishments I could list that we experience in life, and still, unbelievable. Sorry. Hang that up. Still, all of those wonderful, awe-filled experiences, as brief as they are, they're still on top of all that stress. But we're not experiencing as much of it. We're released from it to a great degree. Sometimes, in a moment or two, maybe we sit and we close our eyes and listen by the lake, and we listen to the branches and leaves and the squirrels running around, and we feel the warmth of the sun on our bodies, and we hear the water just very gently lapping against the shore. And we sit in silence and we just appreciate. And then we open our eyes, and there's all this stuff there, but it looks a little different. It just feels so calm. But all that is our quieting the monkey mind so that we can experience this experience of life and the cessation of the stresses. They're not all gone, but they're pushed down enough to where we can see above them, experience above them, hear above them, smell the air above them. That takes precedence. And we feel so much, wish I could be here all the time. Oh, there are the stresses reminding you, yeah, we're not gone. Right? But what if that brief moment of experience, still not pure, not perfect, but just as it is, we want to experience that. That's our real life. This other stuff isn't. It's all stresses and baloney. Well, enlightenment, awakening, is to go beyond that. Is to go to a place of experience that is completely without any of the stresses. Can you even imagine that? Through this practice, I've experienced that. I know it's there. It disappears as quickly as I showed you before. But the longer you can stay in that, because what happens when you're by the river or the brook or in the forest or on your rock, and you have that moment of glorious experience, if you're there more than a minute, 10 minutes, half an hour, a day, at some point, you won't be able to enjoy it anymore. Not as much. Because the stresses of what's happening next. I can't stay here all the rest of my life. I need to eat. I need to go back into society. I need to go back home. I need to drive a car. I need to leave here. Starts to outweigh the glory of that experience. Maybe you're lucky. Maybe you can totally be in that experience for a week before you go back. Maybe you structure your life so you can do that every week. I don't know. But I do know it's not lasting. And it becomes an attachment in itself. And now you have stresses of, when I got to catch that plane, or I got to get out of here. I got to go. Now you have new stresses. This is life. This is samsara. You're going to stress. So how in the world do I get to a mental place where it doesn't come back, where it doesn't interrupt this glorious, amazing feeling of being alive? That's what Buddhism is all about. And that's what we call enlightenment. And when we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo to this mandala, and we fuse with that mandala, what we're doing is actually seeing the structure of our personal Gohanzen, our mental structure of cessation of those stresses. And when that happens, time kind of goes away. You just keep chanting, and you're in this wonderfully light space. And suddenly you're not thinking about all that stuff. Unless you ask yourself, hey, I'm not thinking about that. Oh, there's that stuff. All you did was let go of your focus. Let go of your single-minded effort to live your Buddha. You see? And the more you do it, the more you stay in it, the more you experience it. You literally stop thinking. It's not that you stop thinking, of course. It's that you stop accruing stress. You have to think. You have to know how to say Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. You have to know that you're keeping a rhythm. You have to keep your eyes focused on the prize. Your mind focused on cessation and Buddha. I want to experience that life of freedom of stresses. I don't want to leave this life. I don't want to leave this body. I just want to alleviate this carriage of stresses. I want my heart to work without stresses, my joints to work without stresses, my neck, my breathing, my nose, my ears, all now involved in Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. It's pervasive, so all those stresses are being pushed out of every orifice. We're cleansing our stress out of our experience of life. And we're experiencing Buddha. Now the trick becomes, can I hang on to it? When I stop chanting, will it be like a light going off in a room and I'm in the dark again? Will I maintain it? I can tell you from experience, you'll maintain it. How long you maintain it, that's a question of how dedicated you are to live this way. Go to work this way. Be in your relationships this way. Go grab a sandwich this way. That's big. If you think of it. If you consider it, I should say. My advice is do what I did. When I felt that, staring at my mandala in that place where everything seems fresh and new and brighter, and I imagine like pre-speech when I was a little infant baby and my mouth was open and I was just looking at everything. I kind of think of it that way because that's how it feels. Just wow. And then I think, because that's already my samsaric mind coming into play, what does everything else look like? Is this only with my mandala that I feel this way? So I slowly, because doing it quickly seems oddly unright, I turn around and I start looking at everything in the room, in my environment, wherever I am. And damned if it isn't everything that looks sparkly new and interesting. Interesting, but not in the old way, in a new way, which makes it more interesting. Wow, let me see what it's like to walk in this feeling. Bathe in it, own it, keep it. It does two things. Number one, you're in Buddha. You're experiencing a stress-free life. Time is meaningless. Until maybe you trip over something or run into a piece of furniture or whatever. The other thing that it does is it makes it very clear. And I'm a painter. I'm an artist. I paint figuratively, which means there are human subjects or subjects of humanity in all of my pictures. And when I see those pictures, I remember them in that life state, but they seem different somehow. Almost like I don't know them, and I'm not sure what they are. Meaning, I mean. I see them, I see the shape, I see the forms, I see the colors, but they don't seem mine. That's it. I also don't possess. What an amazing thing. I didn't know that being in Buddha and the release of stress also meant that I had no feeling of possession. None of it's mine. This is why it's new. This is why it's interesting. It's like, wow, look what's happening around me, around here, around this universe. There's no possession. I don't own it. I just see them. for what they are. And then I realized that when I make these things, and I'm in that flow, and I think I'm in some kind of other space, I'm fully immersed in my stresses. And these paintings are a record of me trying to escape those stresses, or express those stresses, or look at those stresses and ask questions about those stresses. I'm mired in my monkey mind. Wow. How many painters have I had discussions with, conversations at length about this other space we go into when we're in this creative world? That's those worlds of tranquility and rapture. I'm stuck in those worlds. And in the conversations, I'm mimicking the world of learning and realizations. But because those worlds are mainly about learning and realizations, the teachings of the Dharma, I'm confusing myself, and I'm actually in the worlds of tranquility and rapture. And maybe even a good bit of animality and anger. Gee, I guess that painting career isn't as lofty as I thought it was. And when it gets down to, I'm going to paint this because I know it can sell, which I abhor, that's the world of hunger and animality. And not selling easily, the world of hell. So I'm in the 6 lower paths. All this painting and expression hasn't done a whole lot for me attaining enlightenment. I thought it looked like enlightenment. I thought I was working hard toward that and helping others, but not so. But chanting to this mandala and learning about the Dharma and the teachings and following the examples of our great current era Bodhisattva, Nichiren, I'm learning a whole new state of being. Far more valuable, far more far-reaching. And now I'm addicted to that. But that's okay. I just know where the awakening is. I know what it looks like. I just need to learn to inculcate it more and more into my daily life. Not just to be in it, but to return to it every chance I get when I notice how wrapped up I'm getting in stresses. I know that's not true. I know that's not real. I know what is real is that, that feeling of none of this is mine. It's just incredible. I keep having to go back there. That's enough blah, blah, blah. I didn't even get to reading that Gosho. I would recommend, and if I remember, I'll put the link to it, that you go to that video, that podcast, on Letter to Jijo Bo, Gijo-Bo, Jijo Bo, and look at how Nichiren explained 10 dies breaking down of the characters of Myoho Renge Kyo, single-mindedly desiring to see the Buddha. I'll just read a sentence out here. Dengyo, the great teacher of Mount Hiei, before this he talked about the character Myo of Myoho Renge Kyo to mean that which is beyond ordinary comprehension. Well, isn't that what I just described? Then he says, Dengyo, the great teacher of Mount Hiei, journeyed to China to receive instructions in the profound meaning of this sentence from the sutra. Single-mindedly means the one pure way, and mind indicates all phenomena and existences. The great teacher Tendai explained the Chinese character for mind by saying that it consists of 4 brushstrokes, representing the moon and 3 stars, and implies that the mind that resides in the effect of Buddhahood is pure and clean. My interpretation of the passage is that single stands for Myo, mystic, mind for ho, law, desiring for ren, lotus, si for ge, flower, and Buddha for kyo, the sutra, the Dharma. In propagating these 5 characters of Myoho Renge Kyo, one should not hesitate even if it costs them their lives. And that example, as I've talked about before, is simply about not valuing that mundane life of stress over your enlightenment, because it's complete garbage until you enlighten yourself. Then it's all wonderful. The same stuff. You've just changed your mind profoundly. Gone from monkeys to bliss. That's enlightenment in this life. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I hope all of that made some sense for you. I really do. If you keep this in mind as you study Buddhism, you will begin to understand that all of these various stories and emanations and so on and so forth are like fingers pointing at the moon. They're all pointing at the same thing. But we tend to get stuck on the finger. I know how that sounded. Stop it. The pointing. And how do we get around the pointing? And what does the pointing mean? And how do I point? Which finger do I use when I point? What is pointing? What's the point of pointing? Instead of going, oh, the moon. What an incredible thing. Right? Look what my mind can do now. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Keep your practice strong. It makes me so proud that you guys continue, persevere, right? Single-mindedly see the Buddha. Single-mindedly, with that kind of conviction. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.